Do you suffer from nightmares, flashbacks, hallucinations? Is it impacting your ability to do everyday activities like take over as crime boss? Do you feel uneasy and unable to trust people around you? Then talk to your doctor about Cassian. Cassian may not be for everyone. Common side effects include lost limbs, hairballs, and a sudden urge to urinate. Do not take Cassian if you do not have health insurance, as unexpected injuries have been reported. Ask your doctor if Cassian is right for you, because as long as the galaxy has crime lords, there'll always be a need for Cassian. Well, welcome to Streaming Star Wars, featuring myself, Pete Fletzer, and my co-host and good friend, Nick Milkey, from our fellow ATG Cast podcast show, Podcast of the Wills. And on Friday nights, Nick and I, we take to our YouTube channel so that we can bring you this lively conversation that you're about to enjoy. Hopefully you'll enjoy it, right? I mean,
that's what we're going for. That's the aim.
Right, that is the objective, is to be entertaining and fun. But usually when there's a Star Wars show running on Disney Plus, that's usually the focus of the show. But this week, Kenobi is over. Sadly, I'm still dealing with it. I'm still trying to work my way through the trauma. But since it's over, we're going to be talking about the next show coming down the pike and its connection to the saga. We're going to talk a little bit about Andor, and more specifically, Nick, we're going to hit a bet on Rogue One. And we're going to be joined by my dad, Randy, who some of you may have met at Star Wars Celebration, to give sort of a normie's perspective on the impact of what the saga has been. And since he's with us, we'll get into that a bit as well. But Nick, before we get started, I do want to do the old like, subscribe, share, rate, review kind of thing, because Nick, on Mondays, you get Streaming Star Wars. You get this show. So when you're listening to the show this week, you're going to be listening on July 4th. So happy 4th of July. Right. We are recording on a Friday. It's Canada Day. So happy Canada Day to our
Canada Day.
Canadian.
I have a big bottle of Canadian whiskey called Canadian Hunter. I'm going to implore all of our friends and listeners not to Google that, because I don't want you to judge the sometimes cheap nature of me and the things I drink.
Hey,
but if you need a clue, it comes in a plastic bottle.
Well, you know, we promote brown liquor. We don't promote any particular level of brown liquor.
That's right. We're an equal opportunity brown liquor. But I do also have the pod bottle, which is the infinity bottle. So
I love
that. We're just rolling with it. But it's Canada Day. So happy Canada Day to those who celebrate.
Yep.
All of you drinking Canadian whiskey, and also Danny and her Canadian internet.
Absolutely, and hopefully we'll throw in a couple A's for you as well. And hey, sorries, we're very sorry. But on Saturdays you get Disturbances in the Force, which is our no spin, no clickbait Star Wars news show, keeping you in the loop on all things happening. And on Thursdays you either get Podcast of the Wills or Around the Galaxy. And this Thursday, because it's a holiday week, we're going to be bringing you a special revisit to a show from the past. Do we know which one's going to be yet, Nick? Are we?
I believe that it is going to actually be the Podcast of the Wills episode that came from Podathon 2021. Yep. And there's going to be some exciting stuff. I think I can go ahead and throw this out there. Some exciting stuff on the horizon about Podathon.
Yes, there will be
coming up. But it's my episode with Paul Sun-Young Lee. You know him as Carson Teva from The Mandalorian. And I realized in a conversation that you and I have like 100 times a day earlier this week that I didn't have a podcast version of that. I only had the YouTube version of that episode, and I'd love to have that in audio form. So we decided, hey, let's drop that this next week. So that's the plan.
It's a great conversation, and you realize just how much of a fun nerd Paul really is, which is great. So if you're listening, though, on Monday or whenever you might be checking this out, if you want to join us on Friday nights, all you got to do is head on over to our YouTube channel and subscribe, youtube.com/ATGcast. Pretty simple. Subscribe to that YouTube channel, and then every Friday night, or just about every Friday night, Nick and I will be joined by you all here, hanging out, drinking brown liquor, talking Star Wars. Nick, how has your week been, my friend?
How has my week been? It's felt a little bit empty. You alluded to that at the beginning because we don't have Kenobi. We didn't have
Yeah.
an episode of that this week. So I think the stages of Kenobi grief we're dealing with, absence. We'll just call that one of the stages of Kenobi grief. It's been busy. It is, I work in the medical field. I work for a blood bank, a community blood bank. And so summertime, people don't really give blood. And, but the problem is, like, the 4th of July is Monday, and a lot of people are going to blow their hands off with fireworks, and they're going to need blood. So, little free shout out: if you live near a community blood bank, go donate blood as soon as you can. We probably need it somewhere.
And you get free cookies and orange juice. I mean,
that's right. You get snacks, a T-shirt, the whole deal. So yeah, work has been busy. Life has been busy. All my kids are home for the summer. They're home with their mother, so they're all just trying to survive one another. But I'm here now, so we just roll with it.
That's great. Well, you know what? Why don't we're like we said, we're going to talk a little bit about Rogue One. We're going to talk a little bit about Star Wars Celebration. We're going to talk about Andor. We have, of course, our news, and we also have a Bad Takes from Brown Liquor segment tonight. So again, we have a very, very busy show. So Nick, if you're ready to give us the news, let's do it.
Let's go. Numbers tell the tale in the Kenobi finale. Commander Cody almost shows up, and a Star Wars fan favorite lights up the screen. Give us 5 minutes, and we'll give you the galaxy. Another week, another flood of news, rumors, clickbait, and conversation. I am Nick Milkey, and welcome to Disturbances in the Force. All the links to the original sources can be found in the notes, and I urge you to check them out. New information continues to be released now that the Obi-Wan Kenobi series has ended, including details about how Reva was originally utilized in the script. In an interview with The Direct this week, show writer Stuart Beatty, who was originally attached to the project when it was a film, discussed his original plans for Reva. When asked if Reva was in the early drafts of the movie script, Beatty said, "Yes, she was my creation. I created Reva all the way through." He continued discussing Reva's view on the Jedi as villains and how the character originally had no knowledge of Anakin being Darth Vader. Quote, "Yeah, except the only difference in mine was she didn't know Darth Vader was Anakin," end quote. Beatty went on to talk about Reva's original fate, with the story ending with her dying at the hands of Vader in order to save Obi-Wan. Quote, "Because I figured, how would she know that this thing in a mechanical suit that everyone calls Darth Vader is the guy who killed her or tried to kill her? So it was Obi-Wan kind of letting her in on that secret, and that revelation makes her kind of go, oh my God, I've been wrong this whole time. And so she goes and basically saves Kenobi by sacrificing herself, telling Vader, I killed Kenobi. Then Vader kills her, with her knowing that Vader would kill her, so that kind of completed her arc," end quote. Among other things that Beatty mentioned in the article regarding Reva's role in the story were things like with his total conviction that she needed to die in the series, also the coincidence in the similarities between Reva as well as Trilla from the video games Jedi Fallen Order, and also in the earliest form of the script, she was going to be the only Inquisitor that was going to appear in the show. Well, the series finale of Obi-Wan Kenobi show is a week and a half old, and we're finally getting some numbers to see how it stacked up against Disney Plus's other most recent property, The Book of Boba Fett. According to a report also published in The Direct, the season 1 finale of the Lucasfilm show Obi-Wan Kenobi drew a 5-day Wednesday through Sunday audience of 1.8 million U.S. households, which is 20% higher than the Wednesday through Sunday 5-day poll for The Book of Boba Fett, which clocked in at 1.5 million U.S. households. Obi-Wan Kenobi's premiere dropped the Friday of the 4-day Memorial Day weekend in May, and during that time brought in 2.14 million, besting the L+3 numbers of Mandalorian Season 2 premiere at 2.08 million, the Book of Boba Fett premiere at 1.5 million, as well as Marvel's Moon Knight at 1.6 million. All of these numbers continue coming in such a positive way through the 6-episode run of the series that it has continued to fuel speculation about the possibility of a second season. There are no announced plans for another season of Obi-Wan Kenobi at this time. Other details do continue to break about the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, thanks to writer Stuart Beatty. Beatty, who also worked on the project when it was imagined as a feature film, revealed that not only was the film planned, but they were actually going to be plans at Disney and Lucasfilm to make an entire trilogy centered around the Jedi Master, though those plans were scrapped after Solo's performance at the box office in 2018. Beatty also talked about another major deviation from his script, and it had to do with the inclusion of Obi-Wan's right-hand man from Star Wars The Clone Wars, Commander Cody. When asked if there were any legacy characters from past Star Wars projects in his movie script, Beatty confirmed that there were, specifically noting that Cody was the big one. He went on to describe what Cody's first appearance in the show. Well, Pete, something happened. Pull me out.
No problem, Nick. How's it? Technical difficulty, a little bit of a news blurb.
A news blurb. So let's do this.
We
Let's
can
put a
come back
bow
to
on the
news later.
news.
Yeah,
I'll re-record the news when we get done tonight, and I'll give it to you.
We'll put it in tomorrow. It'll be
literally
just
like
right.
My prompter went blank, and all of a sudden I was staring at my face in front of the prompter screen, which is not how the prompter app works. So I don't know what happened, but
hey, it's okay. It's Friday night. We're drinking brown liquor and talking Star Wars.
And Brian gets it. It's Gremlins. We've got some Gremlins.
We've got some Gremlins for sure. Yep.
The news will be available in the ATG Cast podcast feed tomorrow morning, bright and early. You can check it out. The other stories were about our good friend Christina Ariel and the video that dropped of her today. And there was something else, but Christina's the most important one. And the rest of it was a lot of, Celebration tickets went on sale.
Yes, Celebration tickets went on sale for London.
A lot of Celebration tickets have sold out. So, there is some news. You can get the rest of it. This is like a cliffhanger. It's like a tease. We're cliffhanging the news now.
It's like episode, 4 of just like, what happens next? Oh my god!
News 3.5. I don't know, but that was
the
really
Empire Strikes Back of news. Well, you know what? Then, well, why don't we just bring in our guest and we'll just start talking more Star Wars.
Save us from this chaos.
Hey guys.
Hey, how
there
are
he
you?
Is.
I'm well. Am I muted? I just saw something that said my mic was muted.
You were muted when we ran that little fancy package to introduce you into the show, but
okay.
But you're not muted now. We can hear you and we can see you.
Aren't you lucky?
We're excited.
That's right.
For those that don't know you, it's Randy, my dad, who joined us at Star Wars Celebration and joined us. You've become a bit of a legend, if for no other reason because of all the times I talk about you on the show. So
it's true.
We're just excited to have you here.
It's
sure.
true.
And I would like to be the one to say the legend lives up to the hype, because as someone who also joined you at Star Wars Celebration, I got to spend a ton of time with Randy, and we waited in lines together. We walked all over the convention center together. We hung out at restaurants and ate food together. And I can say, like everybody else that I met at Celebration, it was better than advertised. I was so excited to get to spend time with your dad, to get to spend time with you, Randy, and I had so much fun, and we had so many fun conversations.
Nick, as did
hanging
I.
out in those lines.
You are too kind, and I had, believe me, as much fun. And for somebody who isn't really, as shall we put it politely, knowledgeable about Star Wars as everybody who was at the convention, I felt a great deal of confidence walking around with you, just in case I had questions, and I had a lot of them. And it was great to have you there to answer them for me when Pete was chasing after my grandson.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It was pandemonium. Yeah.
And we even had a couple of moments where Pete was working that press badge and trying to do some other things as far as, covering some stuff. And so as a very currently active father myself, there were moments where it was you and me and Jack waiting in line. And so my dad radar was still very much fully in effect and going, okay, Jack's right there. We're good. Everything's fine. So between the two of us, I think we did a good job with Jack.
I would definitely agree. No question.
Well, so on last week's show, we were talking a little bit about Andor, and we were talking a little bit about Kenobi, and we were talking about the connection between it. And I found it interesting that you hadn't seen Rogue One, or at least you didn't recall seeing it, which either says that the movie didn't impact you, or you just, hey, you just couldn't remember. I'm not gonna go further than that, but
you know what? The movie did not impact me, because as I was watching it, there were only two things in the movie that I remembered, and your mother reminded me that we had seen it before, but I couldn't remember seeing it. And the only two scenes that I remembered were the scenes with Imwe, is that his name?
Chirrut Imwe,
Chirrut.
yep. Mm-hmm.
And Malbus, and
Mm-hmm.
it was Imwe's death scene, I think.
Yes.
And
Yep.
I remembered that when they showed that. And then, of course, the last scene of the movie is unforgettable.
100%. Yep. Yeah. And
Without
that's kind of the challenge, I think, for that movie, is that seems to be, and that's actually where the connection is between Kenobi and Andor is the Vader presence. And that's, because you and I were talking about regularly about Kenobi and where do we go next, and what else do I need to know, and things like that. And there was the Vader scene. There's been a lot of kind of talk about that. One of the things that a lot of people had said was, how come Vader was so powerful in Rogue One, but not, when he fought Obi-Wan in Episode 4, which is just days later, why was he so subdued? I have a theory on that, but did you think that at all, Dad, or no?
To be honest, I never made the connection. I didn't give it that much thought. Vader, the Vader character especially in Obi-Wan and a little bit more in Rogue One, was becoming repetitive in that there were too many scenes where he was chasing somebody and the somebody would escape and you would see him going, drat, he got away again. And the repetitiveness of that, I wouldn't say it was becoming annoying. Certainly it was becoming predictable.
It's interesting because, that is one takeaway that you could have from Vader from this series, or just sort of broadly, is that, and the same thing could be said for Leia, like constantly getting caught, right? Constantly being kidnapped and taken out. Like, why can't this kid get away from anything?
You would think she'd learn, but or
but
find better hiding places, at least. I don't know.
It's interesting because, Vader definitely has, and if you watch it, and Nick, I'd love your thoughts on this, because I think Vader never wins. He never like on Hoth, he watches the Falcon disappear. On the moon with the Jedi path, he watches them get away. He's constantly losing. Do you think that's intentional, or do you think it's just how do you think that plays into the sort of development of the character?
There's two phrases that come into my head when I hear you say that, and I agree with you completely. The first one is Vader is kind of like a one man, the gang that can't shoot straight. But also, as a baseball fan and as somebody who's played baseball growing up my whole life, it almost feels like Vader had a case of the yips. And what I mean by that is we know in the comic books, and I don't read the comic books, but I have enough friends that do, and we've seen enough stuff posted online. The relationship between Palpatine and Vader in the comic books really puts Vader in his place. And we get a tiny tease of that at the end of Obi-Wan Kenobi, where he's in his throne room again after the battle with Obi-Wan, and he's talking to the hologram of the Emperor. And the Emperor is basically like, look, if you're so obsessed with this Vader character, maybe you're not my guy. And Vader gets put in his place again to say, he's not a thing anymore. I'm only committed to you, my master. Like, that's been Vader in the comic books, but even to a more extreme degree. The Emperor tortures him. The Emperor puts him in his place routinely. And that has to be something that he carries around in his head every time he messes up, every time they get away, every time something else happens. It feels like it's just built into this narrative, which also feeds into the idea, of course, he'd be looking for a way out by the time we get to the Return of the Jedi. And he turns on the Emperor and he saves his son. It sets that up perfectly over a much longer period of a narrative. So to me, it makes a lot of sense that it keeps happening. And the one thing that stood out to me from the Obi-Wan series is when Reva says, I put a tracker on the ship. Of course, my mind immediately went to, oh, that's where he learned that trick when they let the Falcon get away from the Death Star in 4. He's learning along the way, but it's still not going exactly his way.
Now, you treat, if I can jump in, I need your guys' help on this, or your opinion or whatever, because it triggered something that I thought about, and that is I had an overall question and I had a specific question. The overall question being, what is the relationship between the Sith and the military? Because the military, they're two distinct parts of the Empire. And the more specific question is, Darth Vader has absolutely no respect for the military, except Grand Moff Tarkin.
Correct.
I've never seen him disrespect Moff Tarkin. I've never seen him disobey Moff Tarkin. Maybe I'm missing something, but what is there about Moff Tarkin? Is it his rank, that he's a Grand Moff and not a everyday Moff? I don't know.
Just an average.
There's a joke in there somewhere. I
The
just can't find it.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Is that the reason? But I when I first started thinking about why didn't Vader ever put a chokehold on Moff Tarkin, because he respects him too much, and then that made me think, well, where does the military fit in with the Emperor and the Sith Lords?
Mm-hmm. Pete,
I was afraid you were going to tip that to me, but that's
I have a thought, but I want to hear what you think.
I mean, it does. It's sort of like, I don't know. It's like they use the military just to achieve the Sith goals, but it always feels like Palpatine has sort of used politics, military, the system to get to what he wants. And so from that perspective, the military is sort of the means to the end. But Vader was, he's never had a military title, and he does sort of, to a degree, kind of put up with them to get where they need to go. Where were you going with that, Nick?
There's a couple things that stand out for me. Obviously, with the Sith and with Palpatine, at this point, there's a relatively, and it's a loose affiliation, but you've got the rule of two in place to a strong degree. There's not a ton of Sith. You have Vader and Palpatine, and then you have a bunch of Inquisitors. And the Inquisitors are Force sensitive, they're dark side, but they're working for the Emperor. They're all trying to move up. They're all trying to climb into that Vader position. And then with the military, it's almost like you've got the UN and you've got the Security Council. The military is the UN. Like, you've got the big picture. You've got all these people here. The Security Council are really the ones that are on the inside. And whether the inside and the Security Council is Vader and Palpatine and their handful of Inquisitors and other folks, it does create, the military is there for Vader and Palpatine to command. But you're right. There's a wild card with Tarkin. There's a reverence there that there's not for somebody else. And I don't know, and this may be where comics fills in something. I know there's a Tarkin book by James Luceno that I haven't read. There may be some fill-in that gives him more of that power and gravitas, but it shows up not just in the movies, Randy, but it's in the Clone Wars, in the Ahsoka arc.
Yep.
When that's going on, he's, still in power. So yeah, there's definitely a separation in those two. And there's a line specifically with that one relationship that I don't know fully how it goes, but it intrigues me to start thinking about it more as I watch things going forward.
Well, thank you for that, because you give me a little insight onto that now.
But it is interesting to watch now, and it's, I think, from Kenobi, and then you look at Rogue One, and then you go into A New Hope. It's interesting because I was talking to my daughter Lily today. We were out driving, and we were talking about Star Wars movies. Interestingly, Last Jedi is her least favorite movie, which was kind of surprising to me. But her favorite movie, she said, is A New Hope. And she said it's because it's a whole story all by itself. Now, she hasn't watched Kenobi. And after we talked for a little bit, she goes, I really want to watch Kenobi. But what's interesting is A New Hope has had the biggest impact, or has been impacted most by the Kenobi series. I think it did a great job of bridging back to the prequels and making those connections. And for those of us that watched every single episode of Clone Wars and became bigger fans of Rebels, you saw those direct connections between the Inquisitors, between sort of the history between Obi-Wan and Anakin and his conversion there. But it is interesting now to watch, and I haven't yet. I really want to watch A New Hope because I feel like now all those things are filled in, all those pieces of the puzzle that were there that we didn't really think that much about. I remember Dad and I talk about this on the show a lot, is, you and I talked about the Clone Wars before it existed. We're like, what was that? What was this Clone Wars thing that Obi-Wan referenced in his hut? It sort of.
And isn't it amazing that literally one single line of dialogue in a film from 1977 can continue to spawn 7 seasons of an animated show? Characters that carry forward not only into prequel movies, into sequel movies, into these in-between series. Like I said in the news before it went weird, Doug Chang himself, the head of the art department for Lucasfilm, said, we're getting to tell all the stories that connect all these in-between parts. Like, that's a thing that's on their radar right now. And it all came from one line in a movie in 1977. I think that's fascinating.
I think it's interesting. It's interesting too, because I don't know. Of course, none of us were sitting there when George had his yellow line paper and writing it out. But the Clone Wars was just a cool sounding thing, right? It was. My father didn't fight in the Clone Wars. He was a navigator.
He was a navigator on a spice freighter,
which is hilarious. I posted a meme which I think is hilarious, where he's like, he says he was a navigator on a spice freighter. Now we know what spices. So basically, Owen told Luke that his dad was a drug runner, essentially.
Exactly.
Right? So
exactly.
But this sort of throwaway line, and I said, I remember I talked about it with Hal Hickel. Yeah, I'm dropping a name. I'm doing it. I'm going there. when I had Hal on the show, we talked about how if you were to make A New Hope today in the Marvel type movie world we live in, it would have been like, my father didn't fight in the Clone Wars, and there'd be a 5-minute montage showing what the Clone Wars was, and explosions and backflashes and things like that, and instead it was just this throwaway line, which then led me and my dad, when I was 10, 12, 15, 7 years old, just like, what do you think the Clone Wars was? And it built this image in our head. And now, to your point, Nick, it has given us 40 years of story, essentially, right? Between,
without a doubt.
So it's pretty impressive. And what's really impressive about it, honestly, is that the way the story has been put together has been cohesive and not just sort of trying to jam these little parts and pieces together. It's literally trying to make a great story, which has become a phenomenal story and fun to watch.
Yeah. So in Rogue One, we have a couple of things that certainly connect us to the Kenobi series. Obviously, Rogue One as a whole. Let's do this first, actually. Randy, we talked about how, you didn't really have a lot of memories of watching Rogue One a first time, so you've rewatched it recently. Give us kind of your overall, what are your overall thoughts about the Rogue One movie?
Well, I had takeaways from it. The second, you're talking about the second, obviously the first time I saw it, I didn't have any takeaways from it.
But this time, what did you get?
Except the last scene, which
he sounds like Scotty J-Ro with his Rogue One.
No, I thought, in fact, I was talking with Pete's mom about this after we saw it again Friday or Saturday last week. The actors were very charismatic, so charismatic that now they're going to be able to do a whole series with one of them. And forfeit all the drama about the ultimate outcome of the series, just to put him in it and give a backstory on it. I mean, there were so many. Let me ask you guys this: why do you think they chose him for their backstory as opposed to the tens, the hundreds of semi-major characters they could have used? Why not Mon Mothma? Why not Akbar?
Well, Mothma's going to have a huge.
Mon Mothma's going to have a big role.
Oh, no kidding.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Yeah.
She was actually Genevieve O'Reilly, the actress that played Mon Mothma in Rogue One as well as in the prequels. She was at Celebration at one of those panels that we were able to get to. They brought her out on stage, and they did talk about how basically with the series, we know we've got 2 seasons. The first season is 5 years before the events of Rogue One. That's where we find Cassian. That's where we find where is he, what's going on. And the way I've heard it described is there's parallel paths. You have Cassian running parallel to Mon Mothma. And eventually, at some point, obviously, those paths are going to cross and they're going to intersect, and he's going to become more a part of the rebellion. And then the second season, which one of my favorite parts of Celebration was when, what's Cassian's name?
Diego Luna
on stage. It was almost seemed like he found out in that moment on stage he was going to get to do a second season, even though surely he already knew. So the first season is 5 years before. The second season is going to be the 1 year leading up directly to the starting point of Rogue One.
Very charismatic actor, though.
Oh, absolutely. And so and I think that's a lot of, to your point, why did they pick him? There's so much to tell there. Honestly, it said so much to me the first time I saw that movie, when he's in the alley with that guy giving him information and he's backed into a corner and he shoots him in the back because he has to make a decision as a spy, as a rebel, as an operative. Like, where did these decisions come from? He says to Jen at some point when they're having their back and forth, some of us have been in this since I was 6 years old, or whatever it is he says. Like, we get to be fed all of that. But to your point, Mon Mothma and Cassian are going to follow parallel paths until they intersect. And then I think that second season is going to be more about drawing us to that inflection point of what the Rogue One movie actually was.
Gotcha. Pete, I want to ask you a question. I'm sorry, I cut you off again. I've been doing this since you were 2 years old.
That's okay.
You're allowed. You're the dad.
It's 50 some odd years of cutting off my son. So I may not be able to do this anymore in the future because I don't speak as fast as I used to. However, I wanted to ask you a question, Pete, and that is, if Disney came to you and said, Pete, we know how much you know about Star Wars. We know you've given a lot of the series some really super deep thought. We want to produce another 6-part story involving a character that's never been developed before, but people are all aware of in the Star Wars universe. What character would you pick to do it? And oh, by the way, Pete, if it succeeds, you're going to have a big part in the future of Star Wars for Disney. And if it doesn't, we will destroy you.
Wow.
No pressure.
I feel like that last section was personal. I don't know what happened there at the end.
Well, that last section's been reading your Twitter feed.
Yeah. Did my dad just start working for one of those YouTube channels that hates me now? I don't know what happened. And I'll ask Nick the same question when I give an answer. I think if there's a character that I would love to get more information about, I would love to probably get to know. Gosh, that's a great question, because there's so many different types of, and I think that's one of the interesting things about doing the Andor series, because it is going to bring things together. And so here's what I'll do. I'll give an answer that I think we're going to get in probably season 2 of Andor, and that is, I would love to see more about Saw Gerrera, because now you don't know this because you don't watch a lot of you haven't watched Rebels, but one of the interesting things about Saw Gerrera and Mon Mothma and Jyn Erso, of course, is Saw is like the dark underbelly of what a rebellion is. His partisans are like borderline terrorists. They do what they need to do. And in fact, there's a great episode of Rebels where Mon Mothma is talking to a hologram of Saw, and he says something like, when the Empire wins, tell me how playing by the rules worked out for you. That's a very subtext version of what he said. But I would love to see that side, because that is and I think we're going to get that in season 2. I think because what's such a cool thing about that is you get, and I've said this recently, and I think it's a really interesting concept. In 1977, when you had Star Wars and you had this Empire versus Rebels storyline. It was pretty simple. It was black and white. It was good guys, bad guys. It was, we don't know the Empire story, but we know they're bad. We don't know the Rebel story, but we know they're good. That's all you need to know. And over 40 years of telling this story, 45 years of telling this story, and the change in the reality of our world, where we no longer blindly accept that, you know, we're the good guys, they're the bad guys. You start to question what happens in that gray area. I think that's what the Andor series is going to tell. And I think that's also probably going to be the thing that pisses off some of the quote unquote old school Star Wars fans, because for the same reason they didn't love Obi-Wan for the first 3 episodes, because he wasn't what I expected. He wasn't the big bad Jedi who I'd come to know and love. But it did ask some of those very hard questions. What happens to somebody who struggles with PTSD, who's lost everything and now is responsible for the weight of the galaxy is on his shoulder? What happened to Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi, where he suddenly had to deal with trying to start a whole new Jedi Order, and he saw such darkness in his nephew that he almost tried to kill him. These are very interesting stories that, when you compare it to a 1977 story of good versus evil, princess and smuggler, it's a very different way to tell stories. So that's a very long answer for me to say I really want to see what goes into the thinking of Saw Gerrera, and is he a good guy or a bad guy? I mean, even though he's fighting for the good guys, he's probably not a good guy. So I'm going to say Saw, and then I'll toss it back to Nick.
I like it.
There were a lot of stipulations on this question, and so I'm probably going to cheat the rules at some point, but that's how it works. We just do what we want here. I think for me, this character has shown up in multiple things. This character has shown up as recently as in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, and of course is also in Rogue One. But if we're talking about a 6-episode series, I'm going to go with Bail Organa. And here's what I'm going to go with Bail Organa. There's so much there, because kind of like what Pete, you're talking about, I know exactly which episode of Rebels you're talking about, where Mon Mothma is talking to the hologram from Saw, and it's, we do it this way or we do it this way. And you have the extreme view versus the persistent view. Like there's a lot of, yin and yang, and how do you fight a rebellion, and what's the right way to do it? How do you deal with collateral damage? Bail Organa is a senator. He's in the Senate. He's doing these things behind the scenes. He's risking his family, his wife, all those different things. And also for me, and this is the caveat that I'll throw into it because I'm this guy, Jimmy Smits was also in my favorite television show of all time, The West Wing, where he ran for president after President Bartlett was no longer eligible to run for president. So what I want this to be is a 6-episode Bail Organa series written by Aaron Sorkin. That's what I'm asking for.
That would be cool. A West Wing of Star Wars.
A West Wing intrigue, pseudo-espionage version of that story. That would work for me.
I would love to see his reaction because again, I can't believe I haven't watched A New Hope yet, because I keep going back to everything that has been impacted by everything we've gotten over the last couple of years and impacted A New Hope. I would love to have that series lead up to when the Emperor dissolves the Senate, right? Because that's the big and it here. Let's be in the writer's room for a second. That's the last episode, and he flies back to Alderaan just as the Death Star shows up, and we know, right? That's it.
And it ties in so many things. It ties in everything in New Hope, because that's what Vader says when they're on the blockade runner at the very beginning of 4. The regional governors now have, or Tarkin says it, the regional governors now have control. The Emperor had just dissolved the Senate. He's heading back. Alderaan meets its fate. It's not a happy story, but it's a story we know. And there's a lot of through lines to get to, again, connecting that point, which goes back to what I said about Doug Chang's comment in the Christina Ariel video today. They get to fill in all these in-between stories, and they're really excited about the ability to do that.
Absolutely. 100%. All right, Dad, who would you want to see? Now, here's the thing. I'm so excited to have you on the show because getting this quote unquote normie perspective is great because
Yes.
you're asking questions that are forcing us to think about things. So, in asking you that question, we realize you may say a character that we go, "Oh, well, that's a novel," and then you'll have to go read that novel. But which character from all the Star Wars that you've been watching, and it's so cool to be having conversations with you as you're catching up on some of the stories and things like that. Who would you want to get more info on?
Well, it's interesting you fellas are sticking with the Rogue One theme because I would too. I was thinking about it before. I had a personal selfish reason for Admiral Akbar, but I'm not going to go with him. And you know the reason.
Yeah.
You know the reason. I play poker with a guy who looks just like him. But we're not going to get into that.
Not the guy who plays him, but the fish-headed guy.
The fish-headed guy, not the actor.
And just for the record, I heard this story in line while we were at Celebration, and it made me so happy.
It's absolutely true. I even call him Akbar, but he doesn't know why because he's 80 years old and he never watched Star Wars. The character I think that I would take and make a story out of would be, and I want to get his name pronounced right. You guys will have to correct me on this. Chirrut Imwe.
Chirrut Imwe, yes.
Nailed it.
He's supposedly, I did some reading up on him just to prepare for the show, and supposedly he is one of the Guardians of the Wills.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true? I mean, that could open up a whole insight into the Wills area of Star Wars, which, unless you've read the novels, we really don't know much about.
Well, and even in the novels, it's still pretty. It's one of those things. It's like a step above Yoda's species as a secret. The Wills is still kind of. It's got some backstory, but not very deep. And I think that would be a really interesting story. And you could even have it on Jeddah because apparently Jeddah was a place where the Guardians of the Wills were very, very active, right? Now, Rick says there's a book for that, and I may have missed it. Nick, so first of all, Rick, by the way, we didn't do it. We didn't do our toast. We have a bunch of people hanging out with us, so let's do that. And I want to shout out Rick specifically.
Give me a chance to pour here.
Okay, I want to call out Rick specifically because Rick won our Bandai giveaway, and so he has the where is it? I have one too. The Ronin Mandalorian, right?
So
here.
good.
So, but yeah, let's do a quick shout out to everybody hanging out with us. A toast, a happy Star Wars to everyone. Cheers.
Cheers to everyone.
Cheers. Happy Canada Day.
Happy Canada Day.
Canada Day.
And happy 4th of July if you're listening on Monday. So we have Rick, we have Michael Hoover hanging out with us. Michael says he's late, but that's okay. We're happy to have you. We have another Michael. Matthew, we got I saw Seth in here before. We saw Brian. We got a bunch of people hanging out. Thank you so much for spending your Friday night with us. We know well, I was gonna say we know you have something else to do, but look, we don't.
Maybe you don't.
So maybe you don't. And we're just glad you're here. But Rick pointed out there is a book called Guardians of the Wills by Greg Rucka. Greg, is that in the new canon? I'm not familiar with it, so
I can't. I've heard the title, but I don't know if it's canon or not. But I do have a comparison, and I don't know if this will help or not, Randy. But this is how the Guardians of the Wills, as you said, with Chirrut, this is how the Guardians of the Wills stack up for me a little bit comparatively in my mind. We hear about it in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. You hear about it overall in the historical Grail lore. You have the Knights Templar. You have this other group, kind of a pseudo-religious faction, that their job is to protect this holy and spiritual thing. And that's what the Guardians of the Wills were. They were not necessarily Force users, but it is a dedicated religious sect that says our job is to protect this thing. Whether they're connected to the Force or not is up in the air, remains to be seen, but they're dedicated to that one kind of single focus thing.
Now, awesome. why does Imwe constantly repeat, I am at one with the Force is at one with me?
Mm-hmm.
I probably misquoted.
It's
Why?
I'm gonna guess it's in this book, and Rick now has me like I gotta read this book, and now I remember hearing about it. I just didn't recall the name of it, and so I do recall hearing about it. It's sort of
And Brian has a good point. It should be canon if we're talking about Baze and Chirrut. It's new enough.
yeah,
that it
so
would
it's
be
definitely in the in the canon. I think it's it's sort of a force user sort of mantra. I think even Ahsoka used it in. Did she use it? I feel like she used it in the Clone Wars episode 7, the season 7. But because I did hear it somewhere else. If somebody in the chat knows where else we heard that, that would be it. But it's like it's sort of a
It's a mantra.
Yeah, a mantra to kind of center yourself, I suppose, and
Right.
get
yeah. It's actually, if I understand this correctly, because there's a couple of different versions of this. The one, of course, we're most familiar with is "May the Force be with you." We get that all throughout the original trilogy. We get that throughout all the different movies. We have "I am one with the Force is with me." If I understand this correctly, the Will's version of that is "May the force of others be with you." And that's something that's also filled in. And so as you think about what the Force is described as, it's a connection between every living being. It's a way for them to connect on some. There you go. Rick says it. It's a mantra, a way for non-Force sensitive to attempt to connect, adopted by actual Force users to center and calm themselves.
But isn't Imwe Force sensitive?
He gives all the earmarkings of being Force sensitive.
I was going to say, in that dueling scene where he's fending away the bullets or the ammunition that's coming to him.
That's right.
Or
when he shoots down a TIE fighter.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, well, I think he's just like trying to, it's almost like sort of psyching himself up to do it as well, and kind of like trusting in the Force, even though he's not a Jedi, trusting in the Force to get there. And Michael, thank you, Michael.
Is blind too, for God's sake.
Oh, so this is let's talk about Rogue One for a second, because some of the great things about Rogue One, and it's funny. Yes. Nick and I always joke about we never want to be that show that's like, remember that time when the guy did that thing? It was awesome.
But here we are,
but here we are. But I think that's one of the great things about Rogue One. Somebody said it in the chat earlier on, so I can't scroll all the way back to see it. But first of all, it had that gritty feel that the very first Star Wars we saw on screen had. It has sort of that sort of very, very sort of gritty is the best way to put it. But it also had the humor that I think, we forget Star Wars is very funny. We forget that there's some hilarious thing. When they put the blindfold on Chirrut, he says, "I'm blind. Are you serious?"
Yeah. Are you kidding me? I'm blind.
Right. It's so great. And of course, K2SO, which has become one of my favorite characters. That's one of the interesting things about Rogue One, is it's not a saga story, although you could argue that it kind of is. It's like 3.9, right? It's episode 3.9. Yeah. It's kind of in there. But it has 3 characters that became some of my favorite characters. First of all, I do love Diego Luna. When you asked before, Dad, about why they're doing Andor, I think it's because so many people loved his character. And he was really in that gray area, but fell to the good side at the end, right? You have K2SO, which I will admit, and I do this all the time, and I don't know when I'll ever get over it. I probably never will. I saw the first pictures of K2SO before the movie came out. I was like, could they make a more generic looking sci-fi robot? Come on. But he's amazing. And his sense of humor is so good. When he smacks Cassian and says, and there's a fresh one where that one came from. And by the way, I understand that was totally ad-libbed on set, which is amazing. Yes. But one of my all-time favorite Star Wars characters, all of them, Kenobi, Vader, Luke, Rey, take them all. I love his name just fell out of my head. No, not Chirrut. Krennic, Orson Krennic.
Yeah,
I love Orson Krennic. And I think it's because I've spent so many years in corporate America to see that he is that classic middle management who just gets he wants to be successful. But he's like just below that level, and he's never going to get there. And he's he grinds it out and he
He's
makes
fighting for it.
mistakes, but he's fighting for it. But he's just such a great.
We stand
character.
here in front of my achievement, not yours.
Yep.
That's what he says. Like
Yep.
he's fighting because I've been busting my butt trying to get
Right.
this thing done.
And then Tarkin's like, "All right, this is mine now.
He's
I'll
like,
let
"Yeah,
the
cool,
Emperor know
man."
it works."
Yeah. I'll tell him you said hi.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, the CGI on Tarkin was awesome. I
actually think
CGI. What do you call that?
You're right.
Is it CGI?
It is CGI.
I thought Tarkin was awesome, and I thought Leia was stinky.
Yeah, correct. And that's really, I'm glad you brought that up because that is something that since Rogue One came out in 2018, we got some versions of that at the end of Mando when Luke shows up. We get the advanced version of that when Luke shows up in Mando Season 2 and when Luke shows up in Book of Boba Fett. Like, that technology is continuing to progress. I will be perfectly honest. The Tarkin stuff in Rogue One did not bother me. The Leia stuff at the end of Rogue One did bother me. It wasn't good.
Yes, I agree.
Definitely. It's one of the rare times where I was pulled out of a movie, and you know, like, so, like, but for example, even in Kenobi, there's no denying that they must have run out of budget before they decided to de-age Hayden. Right. But it didn't bother me. I was like, this
didn't matter
because it almost felt like a memory. It felt like, you know, this is it all worked. But Leia, it pulled me out. It pulled me out of the story.
Well, you know, Pete, it reminds me of, and I said this somewhere else recently. It reminds me of when everybody was losing their mind when all the old expanded universe stuff was made, you know, not canon anymore. It became Legends. And the idea that those EU Legends stories were the stories that people told around campfires.
Yep.
It became that moment of going, okay, all I needed was a frame of reference. All I needed was for it to make sense. And now that makes sense, whether it's in, you know, the Leia part, whether it's in, you know, seeing these other things like, okay, go like with Hayden in Obi-Wan, like, it's a story told around a campfire. It's a memory. It's not, this is exactly what went on.
Correct. 100%. So,
Pete, let me ask you your opinion on this, since we're talking about.
By the way, that my dad is right now auditioning to get our fifth show on the ATG Cast podcast stream, and I'm loving it because
at this point he's got it.
He's got it. I think the interview's over. You got it.
Well, you know, you may need a fill-in, you know, for when you go on these worldwide vacations with the family.
Yeah.
Which you probably won't be able to do now that you've got that construction going on.
Oh my gosh, it's
we won't get that's a side topic altogether. I wanted to ask you, Pete, and Nick also, but I want to start with Pete. What did you think of the music, if anything?
From Rogue One or
in Rogue One, just Rogue One.
I'll go first. My biggest challenge with Rogue One, it's funny, there were two things about Rogue One. In hindsight, I think the music is better than I thought my first watch, because there's a couple things about the music that I think are great, which I'll come to in 1 second. But I do feel like my first impression was it felt like, you remember back in the 80s when they would do a show, but they couldn't quite use the music, so they had to buy some generic version of the music.
Right.
That was the way I felt about it at first. However, in listening to the music of Rogue One, my favorite part is the fact that and who's the guy who wrote it? I can't remember his name, because there was also the guy who did the
is it Michael Giacchino?
Yes, it is. Because or did he do Solo?
I got you. Hang on. Keep going.
We'll check that out. But whoever it was recognized and inserted the Death Star theme, which I forgot actually existed, right? The dun 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 dun, just a handful of notes,
right?
And that came up a couple times when the Death Star appeared, and that was brilliant. There was a bit of use of some of the classic Imperial themes that were not in Empire or Jedi, but only appeared in Star Wars: A New Hope, and so I felt it was pretty decent. The other thing that struck me about Rogue One, because it was the first non-saga film, showing the planet names when they appeared at the planets, and again told us to hell Hickle, name drop, felt very much like Star Trek to me, right? That feels like Star Trek would be like, this is Omega Delta 7 or whatever, you know, and so that felt Star Trekky to me. But Nick, how did the music strike you?
It didn't, and that's kind of a weird like in between for me. And it was Michael Giacchino. That's right,
Yep.
Giacchino. I can't pretend to pronounce that last name.
I think we need a Rick Villanueva show as well. By the way,
I would say at this point, Rick and Randy, the Rick and Randy show. That's where we're headed.
Hi, Rick.
But there are those moments when the musical stings hit, and like honestly, what you're talking about at the very, very beginning, you talk about the planet names. This was the movie that we get Giacchino, Brian says. So
Thank you,
Giacchino,
Brian.
Michael Giacchino. Thank you, Brian. We get the hard, blunt sound at the very beginning of the movie. It's just that like, bam, and then it leads into the movie. We don't get an opening crawl. We don't get what we get in Solo, which was also like a little bit of setup, but not an opening crawl. Like it changes. For me, honestly, the biggest music takeaway from this movie is that opening initial, just like out of the blue, like sting, like that noise happens. And then you're heading into the planet where Galen's on his farm and he's doing his thing. And I love music. And it's a weird thing to say I'm bad about the music sometimes in Star Wars. Like I'll talk to Scotty or I'll talk to you or I'll talk to my friend Steve, who I started my podcast with. And he's like, oh yeah, they played the Rey theme as a tone to this and as a connected thing to this. And I'm going, how did I miss that? Because I played in bands in college, and maybe it was because they were rock bands and not, full on like symphony soundtrack, whatever. In this movie, the music didn't stand out for me really, other than that opening thing. Like we didn't get a big fanfare. We didn't get a big something. But I don't dislike it. And I'm sure if there was no music in it, I would notice it missing. But for me, it feels pretty just like, okay, yeah, I watched a Star Wars movie.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting too, because music in Star Wars there's been some real winners. Like, for example, John Powell, who did Solo. I looked it up while you were talking. He brought in all the right chase themes at the right time. He, and that's one of those things. And I think that's one of the things about Kenobi. And again, it was a complaint from the people who were impatient with the Kenobi show. And I think the Kenobi show is an exercise in patience. I've talked 100%. It's funny. I've talked about my chiropractor, right, who's a Star Wars fan, who I always go. And so I saw him today, and my wife actually works for him. And a couple of weeks ago, she's like, Grayson was like, don't tell Pete, but I don't like this show. I'm not digging it. And today when I went to see him, he was like, that was amazing. It was so great. And because we talked about that patience. Now, from a musical standpoint, one of the things people were talking about when they were talking about Kenobi was a wimp and all these other things was, how come we haven't heard Vader's theme? How come we haven't heard the classic themes? If they had given us the Imperial March or Leia's theme in episodes 1 through 5, when it hit in the last 5 minutes of this show, it wouldn't have had the grace or the power that it ended up having. So I'm really glad that Holt, I can't think of her, is it Nicole?
Yeah, Natalie Holt.
Natalie Holt. The soundtrack she created was orchestral, and it moved the story from a emotional standpoint, but she knew when to wait to use these critical themes, much like Gene Kino using the Death Star theme when it appears on screen. Just these little things that we as Star Wars fans go, okay, that's the thing. That's what's missing. It's like the color of is the color of the lightsaber too blue or not blue enough, right? These are things that just as fans, we pick up on those little things, and we may not even notice it. So what was your thoughts?
It's awesome.
What was your thoughts on the score, Dad?
Well, I wasn't impressed by it at all. I think I'm more in Nick's camp on this. To me, now just to back up a little bit, in doing my research, I found out that Rogue One was the second biggest selling movie of the year that it was released. That amazed me. Number 2 in gross receipts. It amazed me because I didn't remember going to see it. And yet it was. So that shows not only the power of Star Wars fans, but that the movie was a lot better than I remember it being.
Well, it is interesting. I think if you talk to a lot of Star Wars fans, Rogue One is very high up on people's favorite list.
Yeah,
And it's a true war movie. I mean, more than any other Star Wars movie. I mean, it is a gritty war movie.
I just looked it up. If we want to give a comparison on both sides, number one in 2016. Actually, let's do this. Take a guess. What was number one in 2016, Pete?
I don't even remember what other movies were out.
2016.
I'm not sure.
Okay. 2016, number one, gross box office, domestic box office 2016, Finding Dory, the sequel to Finding Nemo. Yes.
Okay.
And then number two, as you mentioned, Rogue One.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody want to wager a guess on what number three was just on the other side of Rogue One?
I'm going to guess.
I'll give you a clue. It's a Marvel movie.
Oh, Marvel. Okay.
2016 Marvel. I don't know.
Captain America: Civil War.
Civil War came in behind Rogue One.
I wasn't going to say that.
Yep.
I was not going to say that.
No, I was not going to say that.
Yeah.
But so getting back to
between Finding Dory and Civil War, you have Rogue One.
Now, the reason I brought up the fact that the movie did so well at the box office, to me, one of the elements of a great movie is not only the music, but the theme. Mm-hmm. And great movies, 9 out of 10 times, you walk out of the movie theater humming the theme. Star Wars, of course.
Yep.
Empire Strikes Back. You had 3 themes to hum when you came out, and I'm one of the few people who think that Empire was a better movie than Star Wars was.
Oh, you're not one of the few. No,
you're not one of the few at all.
I could go on and on. I'll tell you another movie that's underrated, but the theme and the music really elevates it in my mind, is a movie called Contact.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Jodie Foster. I'm with you.
But I'm getting off the track here. There is nothing about the music in that movie that I remember that I would walk out humming. Now, remember when we were at Celebration and we saw Paul Williams playing
John Williams.
John Williams.
Paul Williams was
Paul Williams, a lot shorter.
Than John.
I always get them confused. I don't know why, but
better than Andy Williams.
When Paul, yeah. When Paul Williams was up there leading the orchestra and playing the Obi-Wan theme that none of us had ever heard before, I don't know about you, but I walked out of there humming the Obi-Wan theme.
Yeah.
It was distinct. Yep. It stuck in my mind. And I think it definitely contributed to my really enjoying that series, because as I was watching it, every now and then there'd be a scene while I was watching where the theme would pop in my mind and I would play it myself and it would be appropriate to me. And once again, the music helping out a vehicle of a good movie.
I think that's a really fair point, and it is amazing, and a show in itself is just, especially with John Williams now saying he's retiring after Indy. There's something about Paul. He literally, as Kathleen Kennedy said when we saw him come out, that he scored our childhood. He is really, and so really to that point, the Obi-Wan, and credit to Ludwig Göransson for The Mandalorian. We hum the Mandalorian music, or I don't know about you guys. I do. I hum the.
I do, for sure.
And I will like I will go all in on it. Book of Boba Fett was cool, but honestly, right at this moment, I can't think of it like I can the other ones. And I know it was good and important and it stuck with me, but it wasn't what Ludwig did and what John Williams has done.
And isn't it funny? Because I would guess that most Star Wars fans would place Boba Fett a little bit below The Mandalorian.
As far as the show goes?
As far as how much they liked it.
Yeah, I think that's a consistent perspective. Yeah. Oh, and Brian brings up David W. Collins' show. Yes, the Soundtrack Show is one of my favorite podcasts, if not my favorite podcast. One of the first ones that I listened to, and it's amazing
and
the stuff he
former
pulls
guest
up.
of Around the Galaxy, David W. Collins.
That is true. That is true. Thank you for being my my what was
okay, I'm your hype man.
Yeah, hype man. But yeah, no, you're right. The music is so important. So yeah. Well, cool. Good. Any yeah, go ahead, Nick.
I was just gonna say, as we wrap up Rogue One, there was something else that we wanted to talk to your dad about.
Yes.
In kind of the grand scheme of the show tonight. Randy, we talked about it at the top of the show. We were all at Celebration together.
And some of the people in the chat, Chris Ryans is with us here, and we got a couple other people.
Hey, Chris, how are you, buddy?
Absolutely. Some of our other friends from Celebration are here, hanging out tonight, watching the show. Pete and I went to this experience in a different way than you did. You went in, we make the joke all the time, and you even referenced it yourself, as the normie, as the more middle of the road Star Wars fan. I would love to hear, and I know Pete and I talked about this in a text yesterday or whenever it was, your thoughts on your experience at Star Wars Celebration as a quote unquote normie heading into the deep sweaty nerds, the people like us. You got to see all of it. You got to see us nerding out with our podcast friends. You got to see us hanging out together, meeting for the first time in person. Tell us about that experience for you as more of a day-to-day Star Wars consumer.
Okay, I'm glad you asked me that because especially now that I've just finished my beer, I can give you a nice long-winded.
Now we're ready. Let's go.
Now.
he may deserve full screen at this point.
Yeah.
No, get me off full screen. I've got no one to look at. Anyway, I was going to say I have thought about this, and I came at that convention a little bit different with a different perspective than you guys did.
Sure.
When we invented our science fiction and horror trivia board game, we started hawking it at various science fiction conventions, horror conventions, Star Trek conventions, because there weren't really Star Wars conventions in the late 90s.
Sure.
I kind of got into fandom and became friendly with a lot of people who were in fandom. Science fiction fandom, when you go to a science fiction convention and science fiction fandom, you have a bunch of people who get together who are all trying to prove that they're the smartest person in the room. And there's no overt family connection between the people. There's a friendship connection. There's a certain amount of respect connection, but not that much. But it seems like the objective there is to prove the other guy wrong. Hey, you said this. He wasn't wearing a brown shirt in that movie. He was wearing a green shirt, that kind of thing. And it can kind of wear you down after a while. I was going into this celebration with the same idea that it was going to be a bunch of Star Wars fans who were trying to show, I know more about Star Wars than you do. I'm a bigger fan of Star Wars than you are. I've been following Star Wars longer than you have, that kind of thing. And the absolute opposite was true of the people that I met. There was nothing but affection and love and, wow, it's great to see you. Wow, that kind of thing. I don't know what it was like at the bars after a few beers at night.
It was even more.
It was even more of that. Really? Like it didn't change. It just became even more of that.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that during the day, everyone was family. I think I mentioned that to Pete too. I said, I feel like I'm at a family reunion of people that I've never met before. And it was just such an awesome feeling, to the point where, and Pete knows this, I'm dying to take Pete's mom to London. And we're talking about going to London for celebration over there, because I want her to experience the same feeling that I experienced.
That's amazing. And the thing for me, and I've said this, in a variety of places, and I think it seems like one of those like obviously duh kind of things. You can go to San Diego Comic-Con. There's like 50 different properties there. There's Star Trek, there's Star Wars, there's Marvel, there's DC, that you can Stranger Things, all the things. You can go to Dragon Con, same thing. Star Wars Celebration is so unique in that it's literally over the course of 4 days, 60 to 80,000 people only there for Star Wars.
Yep.
And that's what, adds to the specialness of it. And to hear you say that, and again, as the quote unquote normie in the group, like I said, I had so much fun hanging out with you, and we talked about, everything, under the sun, my job, Star Wars, Pete, Pete, you were gone. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
I'm sure it was a great conversation.
Yeah, but I love hearing that perspective from you, because that's how I encountered it too. And of course, Pete and I talk about this on a daily basis, like social media versus what you encounter in person when you go to something like Star Wars Celebration couldn't be more opposite from one another.
Absolutely.
Everybody was happy to be there. Everybody was excited, and everybody just wanted to hang out because we all love the same thing. That's what makes it special to me.
Absolutely.
It was really, it's because my only real fandom interaction, I got onto Star Wars social media right around the time of Celebration in 2019. And I have dealt with all kinds of sides of the social media place, but everybody told me it's a love fest. It's fun. Everybody's happy. And it really was amazing to be able to go and just be with people. And, I'm not speaking out of turn here. There were people that we had, some concerns or some issues with, that we made an effort to bury the hatchet before we went there, because we were like,
Right.
you know what, there's no room for that shit at Star Wars Celebration. And I'm so glad we did, because there was nothing. It was just, you go in eyes wide open, just looking for people. And it's so funny, people that I've only met through the podcast, who I'm friends with on social media, you hug these people, like Fanboy Cantina. That's like one of the highlights of the trip for me, when me and Nick were walking somewhere.
We were outside of the convention center, out by the fountain. And I don't remember who we were looking for, but we were looking for something else, or you and I were together, and it was one of those moments like, all right, we're on a mission, we're doing this thing. And somebody went, Nick and Pete.
Yeah.
And we turned around and we're like, and it was Fanboy Cantina. We're like,
right, because we'd never seen his face, but
correct.
And it was just so cool. The one side, it was like, it was cool that somebody recognized us, but more importantly, I mean, we greeted him with a hug. It was just like, this is the guy. We just it was such an amazing experience, and it's so great that Star Wars is that connection. And I think people forget that. And when you see all the crap online, all the negativity, you got to remember also that is such a small percentage of the reality. Even if there's a million views on a video that's negative, that's a very small percentage, and a very specific group of people who, honestly, I'm not gatekeeping when I say this, they're not in the same sort of fandom. They may be Star Wars fans, and that's great that they love Star Wars, and that's so important, and that's so cool. But they're not in it for the same reasons. And I think that 30 to 40,000 people that were in Anaheim last month, they were there because it's so amazing. I think it was I don't remember who it was. It might have been Adam Russell from Thank the Maker, who was like, when you go there, just throw it all out the window. And if you're standing in line with somebody, just start talking Star Wars with them, because they're there for the same reason. It's he was like, it's the only time you're going to be able to do that. And it's so true.
Well, my funny connection to that, and I know that Randy experienced this as we were both standing there, we took like 500 stickers and buttons and all these things that were like, we're going to hand these out for the podcast, and we're going to hand these out for the stream, and we're going to hand these out for the channel. We're going to do all this stuff. And there are moments where I'm like, I have this stuff and I feel a little bit awkward. Like, should I give this to people? And I'm like, it's Star Wars stuff and people like free stuff. Why wouldn't I just start giving it away? So we'd be standing in those lines, or like you gave a bunch of stuff to Jack and you were like, you can't have lunch until you give all these away.
I didn't say that.
Jack went through a transformation, didn't he?
He did.
Yeah,
absolutely did.
Jack became
he
was like Oprah. He's like, you get a sticker and you get a sticker.
It was great. It was great.
No, I have two takeaways with my grandson from this from the convention. The celebration. The first one is watching him become a Star Wars fan.
Yes,
he was kind of on the border here and there as far as fandom goes. But the day in Disneyland, when he made his droid and he made his lightsaber, I think that was the thing that put him over the top. That day put him over the top.
Yeah.
And the way that people greeted him at the celebration and made him feel a part.
Yes.
That made him, without a doubt, a fan. And then the second thing was in a certain Japanese restaurant that Jack and I went to. I had never had dinner with my son alone. While Pete was out drinking with you guys, I was taking my grandson out to dinner, and we had dinner at the Japanese restaurant. And by the time we got out of that restaurant, Jack had become the most popular person amongst all the waitresses and the help in the restaurant, to the point where we went back there 2 nights later and they were all coming up to Jack. Oh, hi, Jack. How are you? It was unbelievable. We introduced Pete to, you're Pete's dad, huh?
Yeah, see,
I'm sorry, you're Jack's dad.
Yeah, it was really cool with for Jack. One of the things that I think I said this a couple of weeks ago, when we were on the plane, because Jack gives me a hard time sometimes because I do, 8:00 on a Friday night. Sometimes we'd probably rather watch a movie, but I'm like, I'm going to go do the show. And he's like, oh, your podcast. And on the plane on the way back, he says, Dad, I'm sorry I gave you a hard time about your podcast. Star Wars is awesome. Wow. And I was like, okay, good. We got this. So he'll be taking over the show at some point. Maybe we'll get the Randy and Jack show. And then
there you go.
That would be interesting. As long as we could do it from a Japanese restaurant.
Sure. Absolutely. I think that we're fine.
All right. So let me bring this up. Randy referenced, because among the many things that Randy did, including babysitting me in line while we waited to get into things, he had time with Jack in the evenings while you and I had the ability to hang out, whether it was at the Marriott bar, whether it was at the Hilton bar. Mm-hmm. We got to spend some time with our, as we like to say, our weird space friends.
Yep.
We spent 2 hours with Jason Fry, who wrote the novelization of The Last Jedi. We hung out with, a variety of people. Bars were a big part of that. Also connected to bars, just this week, Pete, we had a news story that leaked about a bar that relates to Star Wars on a cruise ship and a drink that was available. And I feel like maybe you have some thoughts that connect to that. So this feels like the right transition to jump into a bad takes and a brown liquor. Do you have that for us tonight?
I do. And that was super smooth, man. I love it. That was as smooth as the Infinity
Nicely
bottle.
Done.
Well done.
Randy and I are going to hang out and you're going to do your thing and we're going to talk about it when you get done.
You got it. Well, what's another week in Star Wars without some fabricated controversy? With the Kenobi series over and 2 months away from Andor, the next major thing coming out of Disney as it relates to Star Wars is the Disney Wish cruise ship. Now, this is not just a Star Wars cruise. It includes experiences from all around the Disney entertainment giant, from dining with the Avengers to visiting a virtual New Orleans from The Princess and the Frog to a Star Wars themed bar called the Hyperspace Lounge. Now, the experience features virtual windows into space, an extensive Star Wars themed drink menu of beer, wine, and cocktails, but it also features the most expensive drink in a Disney park or cruise. It's called the Kyber Crystal. The drink experience is an elaborate cocktail with yet to be disclosed ingredients and served in a dry ice laden Camtano. Now, for those of you who aren't sure what a Camtano is, that's the ice cream maker looking thing that is sort of a portable safe that the Mandalorian received his bounty in from the client in season 1 of the show. The cost for this drink is $5,000, not 500, $5,000. So, as the maiden voyage of the ship happened to be this week, and it's been populated by bloggers, travel writers, and journalists, of course, news of this drink made its way to the internet, and the reaction was, well, not unexpected. The responses ranged from "this price is disgusting" to "just Disney profiting again" to "how is this even ethical" to "George Lucas would never approve of this." And you know what? I completely understand that perspective. At face value, selling a cocktail in a fancy container for $5,000 is absolutely excessive, and it's staggeringly high priced, but it's not disgusting. It is, in fact, Disney profiting again, and it is completely ethical. And I hate to say it, but George is the godfather of wherever possible make money on a franchise. So let's start with that George Lucas comment. The man reinvented merchandising and the blockbuster. He was brilliant enough to take a $500,000 pay cut from the Star Wars production in order to retain all the rights to merchandising. I'm not telling you anything you don't know when I say that Star Wars and merchandising are joined at the hip. Even people who aren't even Star Wars fans probably have some piece of memorabilia in their home somewhere. So how would George feel about this drink? He might feel a little icky, but I think he might approve, right? I can't speak for him, but I think he probably would. But let's get to some of the other points. Is it ethical? Yes. Calling a $5,000 drink unethical is a complete misappropriation of the term. I will agree in principle that if you were charging $5,000 for water in the parks on a hot day, you could call that unethical. When I was in Disney World a few weeks ago and the water was $3.50 a bottle, I didn't feel it was unethical. I felt it was excessive, but it was not unethical. No one is forced to buy this $5,000 drink. It's on a menu alongside typically priced $10 to $20 drinks. It's a choice to buy it, like buying any other sort of Disney item or experience. And additionally, this happens to be on a cruise ship, which is a luxury vacation. The trip started around $1,800 for a 3-night, 2-guest cruise. It's not terribly outrageous, but it's not cheap. And offering a luxury item at a luxury price on a luxury trip is not unreasonable. Next, and maybe one of the most common comments was, "This is just Disney profiting off of fans." Yeah. Yes, it is. Disney made a $4 billion investment in 2012 when they bought Lucasfilm and the rights to Star Wars and Indiana Jones and Willow and anything else that may have been in the pipeline. And this included not just the films and the stories, but the licensing. They can slap a Star Wars logo on literally anything they want. And they have, from action figures to theme parks, from Bop It toys to t-shirts, from Christmas ornaments to collectible statues, and everything in between. They're definitely going to profit from fans. To think anything else is really being painfully naive. People have thrown out, well, what about Star Wars is for everyone? And the challenge with this argument as it relates to this absurdly priced alcoholic beverage is that it begins to implicate all other forms of licensing. Disney Plus as a service is competitively priced, so it's accessible as media right there. You can buy a Star Wars toy for $5 or spend $25,000. Yes, $25,000 on a life-size R2-D2 at Galaxy's Edge. The range of pricing makes Star Wars accessible to everyone. There's a way to own a piece of the galaxy far, far away at every single price point. The decision of how and where the consumer spends their money will dictate what becomes available. For example, the last 2 Hasbro HasLab projects have shown that there is a limit to what customers are going to buy. Last year's $350 Rancor was not appealing enough to reach its funding goal, and with only a handful of days left, Reva's $500 lightsaber is not looking like it's going to make it either. These are 2 misses when it comes to identifying what the fans are willing to pay for. These are business choices. Now, the stories of the $5,000 cocktail also happened to hit on the same day that Star Wars Celebration tickets went on sale, and the 2023 convention sold out in minutes. However, as is the case every year, it raised complaints from fans saying that the tickets are too expensive. And I hate to say it, but these kind of events are experiences that have price tags attached. Unfortunately, like a Disney World trip or a cruise vacation, all things have a price. But it is interesting to watch the confluence of anti-Disney sentiment related to things like the Kyber cocktail and the Star Wars Galactic Cruiser experience. You know, that's the $6,000 2-night live-action role-playing hotel located in Disney World. It's bringing anti-capitalists and right-wing conservatives to link arms and decry these premium price experiences as pricing the common man out. It's another discussion altogether to talk about why the right jumps on these things, by the way. But the short story of that is that it plays into the base and it gives them another reason to dislike the parent company, which they dislike over alleged moral differences. And it just proves how shallow their arguments truly are. But I digress. The last argument that I've been seeing is that offering a $5,000 drink is a disgusting choice or a reprehensible thing to do. They throw things in like, why not donate that money to charity? And it's a waste of money. And both are taking the moral high ground in response to wishing they could spend obscene amounts of money on a drink. I'll give you this one. Almost. Is the price outrageous? Hell yes. Would that $5,000 help someone in need? Absolutely. However, trying to tell someone how to spend their money is a completely different discussion. Making a drink available that costs a couple or more mortgage payments for the average homeowner is not hurting anyone. If someone has made the decision to buy that expensive experience, then let them. You can judge them, but it's not up to you to advise them on their choices. Now, when I was at Star Wars Celebration, there was a line that practically wrapped around the show floor waiting to pay $300 to get a photo or an autograph, not both, with Ewan McGregor. Over the course of the 2 days, I would estimate that Ewan and the company managing his meet and greets made nearly $500,000. There was no outrage over this, nor should there have been. But the point must be made that if a fan chooses to pay $300 to meet 5 seconds with Obi-Wan Kenobi and walk away with a signed poster, why is that any different than another fan spending $5,000 for a drink and a toy space safe? There is no difference. But actually, there might be, because as I was finalizing this little episode of Bad Takes and Brown Liquor, more details came to light for what one receives as part of the $5,000 price tag. It's an experience that's much more than a $5,000 cocktail. But of course, people reacted before having gotten all this information because that's what Twitter tends to do. So according to vacation blogger Scott Gustin, the Kyber Crystal cocktail is made up of Caymus Cognac, which sells for $250 per bottle, and Grand Marnier Quintessence, which sells for $3,500 a bottle. It also includes shots of Pappy Van Winkle 23-year Reserve, which goes for about $150 a shot in New York City, Taylor Kingsman Edition Very Old 20 Port, which sells for $4,500 per bottle, and the Watenchi Gin, which sells for about $2,500 a bottle. The buyer gets to keep all 4 silver-plated cups, and Gustin goes on to say that, quote, you also get a Star Wars backpack, a water bottle, other gifts, and a hyperspace-themed room decoration. And that's not all. It also includes a bottle of sparkling wine and a voucher to visit the Skywalker Ranch. Wait, it also says here that the Camtano is not included. Oh, that's an outrage. Frickin' Disney. See, I changed it up on you at the end there, and you just didn't know.
I was so engrossed in what you were saying that I forgot that I had a job to do.
Hey, back in the day, guys, I paid $10 to have my picture taken and chat up with Lando Calrissian. So that just puts it in perspective.
And it feels like that was money well spent, for sure.
Oh, it was a lot of fun. I brought a can of Colt 45 malt liquor for Billy D. Williams to sign.
Yes.
And I said, I don't want to insult you by asking you to sign this because of the commercial that you do. And he said, oh, I'll gladly sign it, but wouldn't you rather pop it open and we could both drink some of it?
You got to tell me that
definitely a cool guy. Definitely a cool guy.
I hope he said, hello, what have we here?
What have we here?
Nobody doesn't like Chris Ryan's, though, for sure.
That's right. Absolutely.
But yeah, it's interesting, that what came up at the end there, because this morning, I think it was this morning, or maybe it was yesterday. It was yesterday morning. This outrage that came from this advertised $5,000 drink experience on a Disney cruise for Star Wars, and first of all, it's interesting that people, and not surprising that people reacted the way they did, as quickly as they did. when they did, right? I mean, $5,000 for a drink, it sounds disgusting. Well, yeah, that is a lot. But now that you know what's involved in it, it's a full experience. It's like an excursion. It's like anything else you might do. And frankly, even if it's just for one shot, it's not up to anybody else to decide what's appropriate or not. It may be expensive, and it may be, you can sit here, and I think the three of us would agree. Yeah, I'd rather see that $5,000 go to a good charity or somebody who could use it. But the people who have $5,000 to spend on a drink experience, it's like Nick, you and I going a little bit top shelf when we go out for a drink, right? It's a very different experience.
That's a good point. And maybe the person who spends $5,000 on that drink, rather than donating that $5,000 to a better use, maybe that's the person who's disgusting, not the drink itself.
Yeah. Well, and it's also such an interesting point that, as Pete, you and I talk about it all the time. You do such a good job of speaking out about it all the time. Excuse me. When we talk about things like the fandom menace, let's not give somebody a platform. All of a sudden, we have another article that says, hey, we should not give them a platform. And you're out here fighting the good fight, saying, look, what are we doing? In that same vein, we have things like, okay, there's a $5,000 Star Wars drink experience on as you said, a luxury cruise ship, which is already an extravagance in itself. Star Wars is not the only one that does this stuff. Right. You can do a million Google searches for expensive meals. There's a gold-plated ice cream sundae somewhere in New York City that costs you $5,000. Right. There's a sushi-laden Wagyu beef, whatever the hell that happens in Japan or some other place that is $12,000 for a meal. This isn't unique to Star Wars, but when Star Wars gets a hold of it, and when Star Wars fans and this kind of broad, like, oh, Star Wars is trying to cut you out. Right. That false narrative of Star Wars doesn't care about the little guy. It's exactly what it is. It's a false narrative. It's not, it's setting up this weird division. I made the joke earlier today. Pete's car is probably nicer than my car. The difference is my car is paid for, and I don't feel like I'm being gatekept by the car industry because Pete has a nicer car than I do. That's just the way life works. I pay for this, Pete pays for that. You go to this thing, I go to this thing. Like, everybody has a choice, and that's the way, honestly, that's the way capitalism works.
Well, and I think that the other point too that's really important is that the market will bear it, right? And I think that that's the biggest thing. Honestly, the reason I no longer buy Black Series figures is because they're $26. For some reason, when they were 22, I didn't mind. When it went over 25, I was like, forget it, I'm out. And if I'm not the only one, which I'm clearly not, because a lot of people are still buying them, but as things, I mean, the Hasbro Pulse thing, I think, is a great example. The Razor Crest Soul hit its goal immediately, and the Sail Barge hit its goal immediately. The Rancor didn't even get close because it just was not what people wanted. Yeah, and
it's not compelling.
Correct, and it's the same thing with the hotel, the Galactic Cruiser.
The Galactic Cruiser is another great
Galactic Cruiser. If people stopped going, then it was a mistake, but that's okay. And it's because it's available. It's just like, the reality is, it's like, I hate to say it, and I'm going to sound horrible for saying this, but like Star Wars Celebration requires a certain amount of you have to. There's a commitment. Whether it's it's financial, it's time, it's a whole bunch of things, and
without a doubt,
it's not coming to your neighborhood, right? Disney is not going to go to everybody's house to do a Star Wars Celebration. However,
it's going to one of three places,
right? But everybody can watch the streams. Everybody has access to Disney Plus to watch all the things. As I said in the piece, you can buy a $5 Baby Yoda, or you can buy the $350 or however expensive the $600 sideshow version of Baby Yoda. It's available, and I think we have to be careful of the entitlement perception. And yes, does it feel unethical? It feels gross. Yeah, $5,000 spend on anything Star Wars feels. I mean, as a dad with two kids and a home, and like, I can't justify it, but somebody can, and And if the business,
And my thing is,
Yeah.
more power to him.
sure. Hey, if
I
I had FU money like that and could spend
Correct.
$5,000, I would be on that trip and I'd be buying
Correct.
that drink and that experience in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
So
Well, and I have a couple of points that I wanted to bring up. TW said this: Disney wants everybody's money, pocketbooks,
100%.
pocketbooks large and small.
Yep.
I said this in a text with you earlier today.
Yep.
You can go to Five Below and get Star Wars merchandise. You can go to Walmart. You can go to the Dollar Tree. Like, you can go get Star Wars merchandise that doesn't cost $5,000.
Yep.
It's a spectrum. And
Yep.
if you line up what are the premium Star Wars things, you've got the drink, you've got the Galactic Star Cruiser, you've got Celebration, and maybe like a full suit of screen used Anovos, armor or something
Right.
like that.
Yep.
Those are a few things compared to the overwhelming amount of things that are available at Walmart and Target and Dollar Tree and Five Below. And it's a business, and Brian says it too. It's completely voluntary. What business doesn't want people's money? And of course, maybe the most important point is Pete saves his money for the better things in life, like Funko Pops.
Oh my God, I'm trying to sell them. I just moved all of them into the basement. The worst possible thing, just a little tip for collectors. When you're like proud of the fact that you moved them all downstairs and you got them out of the upstairs and they're out of the way, and you want to show your wife like, hey, look, I did it. I moved them all downstairs and they're nice and neat. Her first thought was, how much are these at $10 a pop? How much is sitting on these shelves? Okay, I get it. But no, I mean, it's also, I think we need to remember that Disney is a multi-billion-dollar company that manages entertainment. They manage theme park. They manage experiences. They manage licensing. They manage. So, and people love to tell me on Twitter, oh, look at you defending a multi-billion-dollar corporation. I'm not defending them. I'm telling you how it works, because people sound, especially the geeks and gamers of the world and the people who are trying to find a reason to hate Disney, they sound ignorant when they say stupid things like that. The reality is, yes,
Correct.
Disney is a money-making thing.
They
spent $4 billion. They spent $4 billion on Lucasfilm.
They saw that as an investment, and they said, "Hey, we're going to get money out of this," and they did it.
And people who say, "Well, that they're not being true to Star Wars." No, they are delivering a product that works, and I can't tell you how much market research goes into every single decision. These are not a $5,000 price point on that drink was not pulled out of the air. It wasn't the bartender that night saying this should be $5,000.
Hey, this will be cool.
Right. There was a lot of thought.
You know what? So suppose there were a bunch of Disney people that were standing around the bar some night, and they were already half in the bag, and one of them said, "What do you think about selling a drink for $5,000? How many idiots do you think would set up and buy this?"
Well,
and somebody else remembered it the following morning and said, "Just for the hell of it, let's see what happens.
Let's try it out.
Let's try it out."
And again, I think your exact point is the market is going to bear that out.
Yep,
that's right.
We've already seen in the several months since the Galactic Star Cruiser launched, there's been some stories about, are they getting, a lot of reservations? Are a lot of people doing it? Is it going to be able to carry that heavy price tag? It may not. And if the market doesn't bear it out, that price tag is going to go down. The reality with the $5,000 Kaibo cocktail is, if there's not enough people to buy it, they're not going to sell it. It's pretty simple. It will sort itself out pretty naturally without causing problems for the general Star Wars population.
And I think the key point, but the key point is that it's not pricing people out by offering because the other thing is beyond Star Wars, as you were saying before, because it's also I don't know, people buy solid gold Winnie the Poohs or whatever, like they have something they love that they collect, and they're going to spend the money. So make it
Pappy Van Winkle 23 by itself. For bourbon drinkers and bourbon collectors and the people that I know who I'm friends with in real life who consider them they'll spend thousands of dollars just to get that bottle of booze. Like Star Wars is just like, oh yeah, that's cute, but I got some shots of Pappy 23. Right. Yep. It's not just about Star Wars. It's about an opportunity.
It's the experience.
Well, the question that I have, and the thing I'd like to know is, what's the cost of making this drink? In other words, what's the profit margin on it?
Right.
Yeah, I'm sure it's first of all, we all know that liquor is an extremely high markup.
Oh yeah.
So they're making huge money on that. But the good news is, and I as a drinker, I was relieved to see the liquor that's included in this experience, because
Yes.
it's not Beefeater gin. It's this fancy Japanese gin.
Right.
And but it's again, it's an experience. It's for people who, it's the same people. Look, if it's probably more for somebody who's not even really a huge Star Wars fan, but goes, I'm on this cruise with my family. When I go to the bar, I'm drinking all top shelf stuff. I'm experiencing these very unique experiential drinks. I'm going to go with this thing. And you know what they would spend at the bar that night anyway? $5,000.
Yeah.
So,
Correct.
Right.
yeah. So
it's going to add up.
yeah. Yeah. And again, there's something for, and I saw Regal Robot pop up there as an example. Regal Robot does it smart though. Regal Robot they make available, you can get the $25 small version of the Tauntaun head, which I did. But what I really want is that $4,000 stuffed Tauntaun head to go over on the other side from my droid. But I don't spend that right now. That's not coming in the door anytime soon. But again, it's available. It's there for people who want it. And again, nobody tells you have to buy anything. I don't care what it is. And so it's such a silly argument to make. It's an argument that's being made by people who want to find a problem with the way Disney's running Star Wars, because Star Wars isn't what they wanted it to be when they were 7 years old, and now they're 50 and they're angry.
Twitter, because the internet likes to be mad.
Exactly.
I get that quote wrong every time.
It's all right. It's the thought that counts. So, well, Dad, we've kept you up. It's, I was gonna say past your bedtime. It's more past my bedtime because but
you're right. Your mother is becoming concerned.
Is he still in there? Is he okay?
No. She's downstairs making H2O bags for the comic book convention in 2 weeks.
Oh, awesome. That's cool. So Nick, you were going to wrap it up. Go for it.
I was just going to say, this has been such a fun conversation. I can't believe I got to spend some more time hanging out with Randy. There's going to be more of this in the future. I know, whether it's not, whether it's London, whether it's, some random, I just come to Jersey and hang out. Like, I'm so glad to see you again, my friend. I'm so glad to hear your thoughts about Rogue One, the connections to Obi-Wan Kenobi. What do you want to kind of close out with? What are your final thoughts for us tonight?
Well, my final thoughts are, excuse me, I hope I didn't make too big a fool of myself as a normie, because I know all the people that are listening to this podcast and watching it are really deep into Star Wars, and I hope not too many of them were saying, that old man, what do they have him on for? He doesn't know beans about this.
Not at all. Nope. But I also think what's important about that too is that if nothing else, it reminds people that the small little sphere of podcasts and Twitter feeds that you follow, social media, is the end of the bell curve. Right.
Correct.
And so it's great to remember that
Pete and I are the weirdos. It's not you. Pete and I are the weirdos.
Exactly.
Well, you guys are definitely not the weirdos. In science fiction talk, you would be considered, outside of Star Wars, you'd be considered the mundanes. In other words, people who have decent jobs and families and, everyday responsibilities, as opposed to living in your parents' basement. And
fair enough.
And so there is nothing weird about either one of you guys. And from what I can gather from the celebration that I went to, outside of the Star Wars fandom, there's not too much weird about the people that were there. I mean, they're all mundanes also, which makes the celebration even cooler, is the fact that you can go there, let your hair down, take on a different identity, different personality, and be respected for what you love. That just blows my mind.
That's what it's all about. And that's what Star Wars is about. It's about fighting for what you love, saving the thing that you love, enjoying the thing that brings you hope in your life, right? I mean, we get that even in that bad CGI Princess Leia scene at the end of Rogue One. What did they bring us?
Hope.
They did bring us hope.
And I'll just leave you with this little bit of trivia that 40 years ago, the Force was the third largest religion in Great Britain.
Well, how about that?
This is true.
That's an excellent way to end. I love that.
Well, that is great because we usually end with Nick, may the Force be with you.
Always.